Okay. All right. Everyone, welcome to week 6, session 2 of the Starknet X the Cairo Bootcamp. If you can hear me, please just signify. I'm to be sure I'm audible. Audible enough. Can anybody hear me? All right. Yeah, make sure to leave a reaction because that's the only way I can know that people are following. So yeah. I remember I gave an assignment in the previous class about writing a simple counter contract because that's what we're going to be testing this today. All right. So I believe everybody has done the assignment. Right. The assignment is just give yeah, so people assignment. So quickly, I just need you to like share your screen and show us the code. Is that possible for you to share your screen and show us the code? Right now, I believe you're all with your computers. All right, Choma. Should we just wait? I'm waiting for you.
Hi, good evening. Sorry, you want me to share my screen?
Yes, I'll show the code.
Okay. Continue.
All right, so I should think that a little recap of what we did. On Monday, we considered simple unit tests, right? Using the Cairo test runner, and we learned how to use the Abstract macros to write tests, and we also learned how to use the shoot panic, right, to write tests. Okay, you're sharing your screen already.
Yeah.
I can't see your screen, Chima.
Sorry, I'm
Okay,
coming. How about now?
Yeah, I can see it now.
Hey, okay, I think it's this one. So, actually, I had this one since we wrote it one time in class like that. So, yeah, that's.
So you really did not do the assignment, just.
I actually went to it.
All right.
But
That's fine. Yeah. That's fine. Have you tried to do the Scarb build?
The
Have
Scarb
you tried to build the contract? Yes.
Yeah, it does. I think it does build. I'm coming.
So I think you should try that. If we're going to work with your contract. So guys, are we going to be working with our contract? All right, I'm sure you have to share the code with us. How is the best way to share this code right now?
I'm going
Is
to
it
copy
available on GitHub? Okay, let's try that.
Yeah, let me build it and see if it works. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, I think it works.
All right, so can you share the code?
Yeah, sure. Oh shit.
All right.
I'm
I
coming.
think
That's
I have
all.
it. That's not all.
Yeah.
Just highlight everything and copy it.
Yeah, it's going to
I mean,
cut.
I
I
could
did.
just write the contract.
Yeah, like Google Meet splits the text, so I have to.
Okay, yeah. So why not we just write the contract together?
All right, that's fine too. We should.
Yeah, but I was trying to save time.
Okay, let
So
me stop sharing.
yeah, you can.
All right.
So I should be this is session 2 and let me share my screen. Thanks so much. Anybody can see my screen. Reactions every time. So yeah, I hope my voice is audible. If you cannot hear me, just please speak my preference. Right. So yeah, this is session 2 and we're going to be talking about 4 main things, which is introduction, Starknet foundry, mainly SM Forge, which are going to be using for our test, and write the basic integration tests, and then we'll be testing the counter contract, and then we'll visit some few advanced concepts on testing smart contracts. All right, so right away, let's just get into the code, right? And before we do that, did anybody encounter any issue based off of what we learned in the previous class? Maybe you tried replicating something and you encountered any issue of any kind, or there's something you didn't understand from the last class. Let's just brush that really quickly before we move into today's class. Anybody? Anybody? This is your opportunity right here. So I believe everybody quite understood what was taught in the last class, right? Reactions, people, reactions. Maybe I'm not one thing. Did everybody understand what was taught in the last class before I move on? All right. So moving on. As usual, I'm going to open our terminal. So I have my terminal, my GIDA directory, and I'm going to be starting a new project. So I believe everybody has SN Forge installed, right? SN Forge, SN Foundry installed. So if you have SN Foundry installed, it comes with the SN Forge and the SN Cast too. So I'm going to be using SN Forge. This is a version of SN Forge I have installed. So on my system. So in the previous class, we used Scarb to initiate our new project, right? But this time I'm going to be using SN Forge to initiate our new Cairo project, and which really just does basically the same thing. So SN4 new, what I'm going to be calling this project. Uh, Somebody give me a name. Session 2 or session. Is somebody trying to speak?
No, I was going to say it's not the counter.
Okay, yeah. counter. I almost forgot. My bad. So yeah, we can name the project counter project. So I've named it whatever I want, but then we're working on the counter. So I believe we have our counter. Please bear with me. My screen is enlarged pretty badly, that's right. So you should be able to see it now. And then we can open our counter directory, counter project. If you're not trying to speak, please turn off your microphone. And even if you want to speak, raise your hand, and then I give you permission to speak things other. All right, so David, you want to speak?
I'm sorry, please, can you go back to what you did with PowerShell? I'm not familiar with using Ubuntu, but I started with that.
Okay, this is PowerShell CLI. So what I basically did, I have SM Foundry installed, so that's give me the SM42, right? So I just created a new SM4 project by running the command SM4 new and the name of the project, which is counter. Right, so when you do this and press enter, it automatically scaffolds the project for you, and then you can proceed from there. Is that clear? That's fine. Let's stand that part. Right, and after that, I opened the directory in my code editor using the code command which comes with vscode. But then on my end, the code command opens the cursor because I have cursor ID installed. So I use cursor of vscode. So yeah, now in my code editor, I can see the projects. Here they have a lead.cairo, entry, a create, and is the font size okay? Font size okay. All right, so I'll be sure of that. Because it's also kind of hard for me to read with the extra large font size. So yeah, you have to compromise for each other. Then test contract comes with the test contract that tests the hello Starknet. They give us the free bonus for using the Scar SFRG. Comes with these are the basic files that it comes with, right? So let's go through the files really quickly. Comes with an sffoundry.toml, right? This is if you're working with SNCast, right? You can see SNCast by default. It comes with default RPC URL, a directory where your account file is supposed to be, the name of the account, the key store, right? And the block explorer and some other parameters, right? You can see the use of each file of each default right here. That's if we're going to be using SNCast, but I'm not really going to be using SNCast because of course not testing, not really deployment, right, from mainnet or devnet or testnet, none of that. So now we have our Scarb, probably know how this works. So there's a package, attributes, and the name of the package is the counter, which is the same as the directory that we created with the Cairo version using 1024 with the edition compiler, and then Starknet version and all of that stuff. So basically all these packages usually goes in from Scarb. From Scarb. Scarb is like the package manager. So yeah, usually goes from Scarb. These are some defaults, right? For SM4, if you are using PRPC, I configure this and other stuff. All right, so let's go. This is a scarb.log. This Please do not edit the Scarb.log. It's written here, do not edit it. The Scarb.toml automatically generates the Scarb.log for your project. The Git ignore contains folders that you don't want to be pushed to Git if you are pushing to a remote repo. You want them to end the remote repository. And then, yeah, we have this. So, if you remember, in our last class, we talked about writing unit tests. And when we're writing unit tests, we usually write the unit test in the same file, right, as the function that we're testing, right? I'm going to be referencing a lot of things from what I've done before, so that's really just shows if you understand what we did before. So, firstly, yeah, in session 2, okay, I've talked about introduction to Starknet Foundry, and also this is Starknet Foundry documentation, official documentation. Drop a link to that chat. So yeah, you can always go to that documentation. There's a lot of great stuff there, right? On how to use Starknet Foundry, and almost every single thing we're going to be covering there is going to be there. So if you don't have Starknet Foundry installed, you can come here and show you how to install it. But then our basic application test. Before we do that, I would like us to just run the Scarb test command in this directory, right? So they gave us a scaffolded project. Why not we test it and see if test actually passes? So yeah, if you observe, I'm writing the Scarb test, right? But we actually use the smforge command to create the directory, right? We actually use the smforge command to create directory, not Scarb. But then they both work together, and that's what I was talking about. They work together hand in hand. So, and if you look at this second line, it's showing running test counter with which test runner. Test runner is using its SM4 test. Yesterday, sorry, on Monday we were using the Cairo test runner. But now we're using the SM4 test. And if you come to your Scarb.com, I think I look at the script, you can see there's scripts for right. Whenever you run the test, behind the scene is actually running the SM4 test command, right? Whenever you run the Scarb test script, behind the scene is running the SM4 test command for you. So basically, that's why it's using SM4 test yet. And the warning it shows here, package stand SM4 standard version does not meet the version requirement of 0.35.1. Invalid Cisco inputs, unexpected gas, got an exception, unexpected gas, right? It's kind of strange, but then they're supposed to pass. I think that has to do with my my SM4 version. I've encountered this before, but we'll let that slide. That's really going to take our time if we really just want to fix that test. Instead, we'll write our test and then run our own test. Right, so you can do away with most of the things in their contract. Write our own contract. So yeah, don't need this. Or I'll just change the stuff for me, right, to make it really fast. Please counter. I believe everybody understands what's going on here. So the quick counter, I really don't think we need any to pass any value, right? It's automatically just decreases by one. Let's just keep it that simple. The function should just decreases by one. We don't need to pass the value, but we can also pass a particular value, so it decreases counter by the particular value, but then make it as simple as possible for counting. But counter auto treats changes. Right, doing this very fast. So yeah, this needs to be contract state, not the contract state anymore. So we can easily pick this by doing self dot counter right. And just make sure you're looking to the code so I don't make any mistake. After everything the contract, then I thought I could get contract you guys wrote as form. Then I can change this storage. And I think it's preferable to do this with using fields. I think I can just do this with you. We have this. Actually, I think everything the basic counter contract. Increase counter, decrease counter, get counter. Right. Any error you are seeing, I'm not seeing. So if you change the counter, you have to assert that the correct counter value is not 0. Or let's say it's greater than 0. Right? Yeah, it has to be greater than 0. If you minus 1 from 0, then you have a negative value. Right? So, and if you observe something, in our previous class, we're using the assert macro, right? So in this class, we're using the assert function. Right? The assert macro, you have to include those exclamation mark right here. And I said something about using the assert macro and the assert function. If you're using the assert function, you're going to pass the field 252. And because the field 252, that's why it has a single string. Right? But if I using the assert macro, you can pass a byte array. Right? You can pass a byte array, which is going to be double string. Yeah, but that's just touching on something we've done before. So reading the contract really quickly. Up next, we have to write a basic integration test, right? So, and if you remember, yeah, I think I mentioned it, but then if you look at this, the folders right here, there is a folder called the test folder. Right? There's a folder called the test folder right here. So when we're writing an integration test, I mentioned that we try to use our contract or library, the contract, like we are accessing it from an external function, how the contract is going to interact with external contract or how it integrates with other contracts. So yeah, in this test, let me just get all these things out. So, so yeah, test folder is empty except for some import dialect, right? Important inputs that we'll be using, and they are provided by the code. So by basic integration tests, we can just write a test that deploys the contract and assert that the the original counter is the counter value that we set. All right, let me explain this using we have a constructor function, right? So where's our constructor? There's no constructor in our contract, right? If you remember what the constructor does, all right, remember what the constructor does. The constructor function is called where we are deploying our contract, right? Is what we use to pass the initial value of the contract variables when we are deploying our contract, right? I'm not getting any reaction, but I want to be sure that when we're writing our contract, remember your contract is a constructor function.
No.
Why?
Nothing.
All right, so we always have to write the constructor function. The constructor function is what is the function that is called, right, when you are is like when you are right making an agreement, right, where you sign, all right, that's okay, now this becomes a contract, right? The place you sign and agree to the contract. I don't know if that makes any sense. Yeah, the constructor function is where we pass our code data when we want to actually deploy this, um, this contract, right? That's the constructor function. So the constructor function is usually called once you want to deploy the contract. So it has a constructor attribute that pass like this, and here we have to pass the self. Right? So this is the right function. Right, it writes to the state, so it's going to use the ref contract state. Yeah. Going to use the ref contract state, wrong number of arguments. So initial counter, right? You can put that as initial counter. to have a type of use64, right? And then we can pass that right like this. Pass that right here into our constructor function. So what this does is when we are creating our contract, right, we assign like the initial value of our counter. Then um when we come to the increase counter function, it basically reads from the counter the initial value we have set here, right? And then adds increases the counter by this specific amount past since. Okay. Well, okay, if that's the case, then we should be able to decrease the counter with a specific amount. I don't know. You guys should. Anything to understand, please just call me. Just doing this really quickly. So it kind of makes sense. Minus amount. And if we're doing this, if we're decreasing the counter by the amount, we have to assert firstly that the counter is not zero. Then we should be able to assert that they are not decreasing more than we have, right? Should be able to assert we're not decreasing more than we have. So self dot counter dot read is greater than amount. Right, who doesn't understand what we're doing yet? This simple as a statement. And then let's make this more interesting. Right, in the previous assert that we've been writing, we just kind of like write a simple fixed panic data. But how about to write a panic data that uses the actual information that we pass to the contract? Let me show you something like that. So let's say so if the amount we're trying to decrease is more than the correct counter, we should be able to say counter amount is greater than counter. That's how it works. Then now we're going to pass the first variable, which are going to be put right here. First variable is the amount, right? So let's quickly go over here and say amount. Let's try this. And but then let me check if the assert macro is okay. Here we have the assert macro. And so position argument. Right, so the error it was given before was because I did not put the position argument. So let me quickly explain. I know I typed a lot of stuff. You guys are probably wondering what all that means. But yeah, this is how it works, right? So I'm writing a simple assert statement from what I explained the previous time. Assert statement takes what? It takes a boolean that we expect to be true, and if it's not true, the panic data is returned, right? What about now? We can return this panic data with its actual argument that we passed into the function, right? So we can actually see what field y, and then we can only do this by simply using position argument. So with this with this curly bracket or parenthesis. No, this is not parenthesis, it's like curly bracket. Yeah, so with this curly bracket, amount, they expect an argument, right? And this is the argument that's going to be passed there, right? Based on the position. This is the first curly braces. So this is the first argument that's going to be passed. And this is the second curly brace, and this second argument is going to be passed. Does anybody understand? Be pretty straightforward syntax, right? I'm not getting any response. So yeah, this is a simple, straightforward syntax. I just see this the position of the curly brace to pass this argument directly into funny data, so you can see like actual useful information about why it's fine. So yeah, if we're calling the crucial counter, I made the change. You have to make sure that the counter is not 0. And okay, counter. You have to. I forgot to change the funny data. So amount. So if you're increasing the counter, yeah, you see, it's always good to read through the code. So if you're increasing the counter, the first thing it does, it asserts that the amount you want to increase is not 0. So amount cannot be 0. I think that's fair, right? Yeah, that's fair. The amount cannot be 0. And maybe we assert amount cannot be less than 0. But then, if you observe this, cannot be less than 0. Okay, this is still quite failed, but a failed, the way a failed works, right? A failed 252. If you're using the assert function, they expect a failed 252, right? They expect the failed 252 as a panic data only. Doesn't expect byte array. Byte array can represent any string of any length. But if you're using they expect the failed 252, which basically can contain only 31 characters. Only so because we're exceeding 31 characters, we are getting the error. But when we are within 31 characters, we don't get the error. But if we're using the assert macro, right, you can use as many characters as once. Just quickly show you that. So you can use as many characters as once. Right? As extra knowledge. So assert that the amount is less than 0. Amount cannot be less than 0. Right? So if amount is less than 0, yeah, that's right. Then you have to write cell.counter, that's right. Current value plus the amount, and if I keep using, you have to make sure, sorry, that the counter but read is greater than 0. So you have to make sure that the current value of the counter is not 0, because with 0 and we try to subtract from 0, we're getting a negative value. Counter cannot be 0. So this should counter also. Okay, amount can be 0, and then amount can, yeah. What correct data can we put here? So the amount assert that counter greater than 0, counter cannot be less than 0. So yeah, counter should not be less than 0. So yeah, that's that about writing the counter function, right? So I did the constructor function. But then there's more we can do. There are some other things we can do right? And who has heard of Open Zeppelin before? I introduced Open Zeppelin in many of the classes. I need reactions. We introduced Open Zeppelin. All right, so we should be able to use Open Zeppelin for this. To use, we can use the ownable component. So basically, a component is a code, right? The code is almost very similar to smart a Cairo contract, but then it cannot be deployed. That's different between a component and a smart contract. A component cannot be deployed. A component can have it doesn't have access to to a storage, a contract storage that gives it a state. It doesn't have access to a state, right? To the blockchain state. A component doesn't have access to the blockchain state. But a contract has access to like the current state of the blockchain. So a component can be added into a contract. Component can just have a particular function, and then you can always add it into your contract to use that particular function. So we can be adding the Open Zeppelin. Right. So in our dev dependencies or in our dependencies, you just go and do this really quickly. Open Zeppelin. I hope I'm writing the correct spelling of Open Zeppelin. And yeah, the current version 1.0.0, right? The correct spelling of Open Zeppelin, double P. Wow, yeah. So the current version is 1.0.0. So if you want to check this, you can easily just come to scarb.xyz. Right? Instead of you just seeing me writing stuff, you're able to figure them out on your own. And yeah, this is the npm for Cairo. So if you just go to Open Zeppelin, you can see I search for token, ready to search for Open Zeppelin. You can see the current version, available version is 1.0. But then this package comes with every single Open Zeppelin package that is comes with this. It comes with the Open Zeppelin access, Open Zeppelin account, Open Zeppelin finance, Open Zeppelin governance. So if you add this as a dependency to your code, right, to give you access to every single one of it. But if you just want to use the access component, you can then use just the Open Zeppelin access. But I think it's quite better to just Open Zeppelin like this, right? So specifying the version, Scarb is going to handle all of that for you. What you just have to do is write this your scarb.toml file and move on. Then you can easily get the code into your code base using Scarb fetch. But then let's dive into using the Open Zeppelin ownable component. So what the Open Zeppelin ownable component does, it helps us to be able to assign the contract to the owner, right? Like when the contract is deployed, right, we can now track, we can limit some functionalities or some permissions to the owner, right? And one more thing that I like to do, if we had observed, you see we are writing all our code in the lib.cairo, right? Most times you're not doing that in larger projects and stuff, not be doing that. So why not we do this? Create another file called counter.cairo. All right, I will transfer all this code of our contract right here, right? Because in some cases you can have more than one contract, right? That interact with each other. And then the main entry point or the main create file, the main thing your compiler is going to start from your lib lib file. So you can just do this public module counter. So what it does, right? This counter dot Cairo is a module. So it exposes everything in this counter, right, to any to the parent directory. So what the public function does, or what the public statement or keyword does, it exposes whatever module, right, to like the parent. So now it exposes this like parent. So now we can the parent will go to the parent directory or parent folder. So now in the test contract, you can easily just import that. I'll be talking about use later. So I believe something you've heard. If you see this also, you can see there's a pub keyword here, right? It makes this public. Makes this public. So we would probably want to write this here. But it makes this right here. It's accessible. Alright. Yeah. I would like us to do some other things to find some our contracts. I didn't plan to take most of our time writing the contracts today. So we'll try to go through that quickly. We're going to emit some events in our contract, right? So we'll be able to test when and have you been taught what events are? I need response. Have been taught events in car. Okay, that's perfect and beautiful. So I'll just try to quickly write to the contract. I want to be able to test this event. Events are what like we can easily what tells the outside world that something occurred, right? Event are like the receipt of it of any transaction of any activity that occur in the in your contract. You try to like emit an event and say, okay, this happens. So people can easily track activities in the contract. So let me just do this. You have an event. So event to derive. I'm using the drop trait and Starknet. So some metadata that always be using for minimum. You have to define the event enum, which will contain all the events that will be called counter entries. And in most cases, right, the events we want to emit are when are mostly for right operations, all right, or when the contract is written, not for view functions, for right functions, right? When things are written to the contract or when something is allocated in the contract. So yeah, and with counter decrease, I'm getting some errors, but then we'll fix that. So we'll also be doing the same thing again. I will create structs, right? Create structs for each event. Yeah. And so in this, we just want to pass what value we want to pass. We want to pass the new counter value, right? Which is of the type use is 4, right? We use to 4 for this. Cannot type that format events must be events. Contract type does not print was the main event. And try to implement and see my Cairo one kind of slowing down. I don't know if it's dead. So sometimes your Cairo one station might just die. Like it's supposed to be actively fixing your code. Okay, yeah, I think it's or short or short. Contract type that is not. Trying to see this error. See I just fix this. Oh, I think I see the error now. My bad. So we're attributing the. I don't think anybody who saw it. So yeah, but this is what comes with writing contact. This attribute is not supposed to be there for the struct, right? So the attribute is only supposed to be there for the event, and it is gone. I missed that when I was copying um, the derived attribute. So yeah, it's only going to be called for the event, not for the other structs. So it's going to be called for I think now we have the events. What else do we need? Okay, so I said that I was using open Zeppelin component. So yeah, doing that immediately. So you can easily get this open Zeppelin starter code, right? I always like to show you where you can get all this stuff. If you just search open Zeppelin Cairo chart, come up on Google. Alright, so yeah, you can see this should be in the documentation. talks. No, it's taking so long to load. But then you can always see this in your documentation. All right, so I think we have that loaded. So we are using the it should be under the access control. Yeah, so it's under access control. The enable component is also using my MetaMask. So you can see the traits and all of that stuff. Right. And see that stuff that if you need it. But today, let me just go into the contract and integrate the petroleum components. It's pretty easy to do. First of all, since we are using the petroleum, I believe you know what the use keyword does, right? It allows us to be able to use like functions and uh, struct any data, right, that has been exposed as public, right? We can use the use to be able to use keyword to be able to use it's just like an import statement, right? For those of you that have written JavaScript or Python, or it's like an import statement that allows us to import other components and functions. Right. So you can use the open vectoring accessing this from like right here, open vectoring access, right? This is under the access control. You might want to where cast this. Let me just show you this quickly. Alright. Don't always have to suffer. So yeah, there's a Cairo wizard that comes with open vectoring. Basically, you can see this, right? Can anybody see this? Can anybody see my screen? Okay, sending a link to that right now. I can pick this for most times. So it comes with like all the stuff you need. So you can see the use, right? So upgradable, we don't want this to be upgradable. We just want to use the enable components. And then they've given us like the basic stuff we need to be able to use the enable. But then this is an ERC20, right? This is an ERC20 contract. So we are not going to be using the ERC20 components. We are creating something simple as the counter contract. So you can just copy that and do this. And then copy the enable component. And ABI embeds enable component, the mixing implementation. So what the mixing implementation means, it means, you know, most time in the smart contract, they usually use either the snake case, something like this, the factor name, or the camel case, the factor name. So the mixing implementation means it comes with like the both implementations of both the snake case and the camel case. So you can just do whatever I want. And then internal implementation of all these things. Yeah, we can copy the storage. I don't know if you're following, just simple stuff to be able to scaffold your project easily. And then my events, start tools, and right here. And also we have to pass enable components to the constructor, right? This is what tells the code that this is the owner of this, the owner of this component. And if you observe it, that there are some errors. Yeah, there's some errors in the code. Okay, it's coming from, let's just fix it. Owner, we have to pass the owner of contract. That's the type of contract address. Which is fixed. So this basically our contract to, like, any questions, trying to write the contract as fast as possible. So you can go to testing immediately. So yeah, if you're increasing the counter, after increasing the counter, we want to also emit, right? I want to be able to emit an event. Counter increase event, right? So if you look at the type of the event, destruct, you don't need this key property. What this key property does is, like, if we're having something in the storage, right? So I want to map a value in the storage, you can use the key property, key attribute to map it using this key. And check the documentation for that. We don't need that. So save the counter increase. Here is the event, right? So we can use this event. In that event, we can use the counter increase. That counter increase destructs, and what it takes is a counter, right? This is 64. So we can now pass to the value for the counter as self counter. Let's change this code. Okay. Oh, we need to go to the struct. So yeah, the event, and the events macro exposes us to this event, right, which you call as a function, and then pass the struct, type of the struct. The value that the struct is meant to take. Expected counter. I don't think I'm missing anything. Right? Is anybody seen any error? I'm not seeing. Counter increased. Okay. I think we missed the semicolon, right at the end of that. I mean, one of the reasons I hate programming. Do it anyways. So yeah, quick recording there, and you guys are laughing at me. So why is this situation there? It's probably my extension that is yet to load. So that we can copy this line of code and just change this counter decrease, right? Is that okay? See, this should work. Yeah, this should work. I hope I'm not writing bugs. Yeah. So yeah, we've managed to write our counter contracts with, and then one more thing, we implemented ownable component, right? For now, we've not used it in our counter. So while I was implementing the ownable component, I wanted to be able to assert that only the owner of the contract, right, can increase the counter. So the ownable component comes with the assert only owner. That's no member, right? Assert only owner. Am I getting this right again? One. Let me just run Scarb search. Probably because the Open Zeppelin component that I added has not been added to my code base. I really believe that that's the issue right here. And yeah, I have to confirm that my storage, yeah, the only component is in my storage. Where was that error? Yeah, the error is gone. So what this attack function now does, just make sure that only the owner is able to call the function. So if the whoever is calling the function is not the owner, you don't get the result. But then anybody should be able to read the contract count. Only the owner should be able to increase or decrease it. I think several times. See, I think our contract is ready. Our contract is ready. So I think it just start with. So now use SM4 comes with a lot of testing tools. If we go into the Starknet foundry, I'm going to see this writing test. Testing smart contract application. So it comes with declare results, traits, and other stuff. Then we can import our contract information like the from Scarb.com. We know the name of our package is counter, right? And then entry counter, and this exposes what the counter function. But what we really need is the high counter dispatcher. Right, so what a dispatcher is? A dispatcher is created automatically whenever I create a trait. Whenever I create a trait in Cairo, it automatically creates a dispatcher for you. So a dispatcher is created for every trait you create in Cairo. And what the dispatcher does, the dispatcher helps you to be able to like use the to be able to call the functions that have been listed in the trait. right, from another function. So that's the way another function can call, another contract, or for example, our test can call the what? The counter contract. That's cross contract interaction within I counter dispatcher, right? And I counter dispatcher tricks. Let me just take this off. So yeah, for the first function we're going to write a deploy contract function. So I believe you guys know the difference between declaring a smart contract and deploying the contract, right? Even the difference between declaring a smart contract and deploying a smart contract. I need somebody to stick on that really quickly. One person to differentiate between deploying a smart contract and declaring a smart contract. Is there still anybody in this class? Quickly. I'm not hearing anybody.
Sorry, what did you ask?
I said I need somebody to differentiate between declaring and deploying a smart contract.
Can I try?
Okay, can I go?
Definitely.
Let me know. You're going to say something.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so I think declaring a smart contract is like registering the contract blueprints, like while deploying a smart contract is like creating an instance of the class. So when you declare a contract, you get a class hash that you use to deploy your contract. Yeah, that's what I
Yeah,
know.
that's perfect. That's the perfect explanation of declaring and deploying a smart contract. So yeah, so before you can deploy a smart contract, you have to declare. So we're going to be doing that. And all of this we're going to be doing, with the tools, right? And the functions that SFO has given to us. And if you notice this, we're not doing any of this on chain. We're not doing any of this on a dev net. We're not doing any of this on test net. We're not doing any of this on mainnet. But we're going to be declaring and deploying this contract on the Starknet foundry emulator. So they have like an emulator that emulates kind of like what will happen if you were actually declaring and deploying this contract, right? Using this function. So if you look up here, you can see there are already some imports some very necessary imports, like the declare contract class trait and declare results trait, right? That we'll be using to declare and deploy our contract. So first of all, we want to be able to declare our contract, right? So what's the name of our contract?
Counter.
So yeah. Dot or let me just write this and contract class. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Expected variable constant. recording. So also, if you look at our contract, I haven't fixed zero in it. If you look at our contracts, we mentioned something called the constructor, right? So in the constructor function, there are some things that are part of the constructor function, which is the initial counter and the override. Those are the two things that are part of the constructor function whenever we are deploying our contract. And those things are called, they are usually called the call data, right? They're usually called the constructor call data. So we're going to be creating a an array for that. So I'm going to be using the array trait, create an array. Then an easy way to do it is common convention, right? Just try to follow along here. I'll explain every single thing. So if you observe what I'm doing right now, I'm creating a function, right? A utility function that what does it do? It returns the contract address. So now we want to be able to simulate using real life contract address, but none of this is done. It's actually real contract address. So we can easily just get a field 252 and name it whatever I want, owner or whatever, and try to convert it to a field 252 as contract address. Also, there's kind of a what I call it, a function called Starknet now, but I still don't see most people using it. I don't know why my contract address const. Yeah, my VS I was not loading. So what that does, it does basically the same thing that explicitly here. So what this line of code does, right, takes the owner field 252 and tries to convert it into a contract address and unwraps that thing. So what this unwrap is just saying, usually it's created in like a box trait, right? So it tries to unwrap whatever that data and just pass it directly as contract address. So you can do this, or you can use constant contract address const. Yeah. Pass. I think this is syntax. I don't really see a lot of people using this, but then I can always get the syntax for you. So that's why I know the syntax for that. So in most cases, you can just create a function that returns the contract address and name as many functions as you want. And basically just create a new contract address that you can use to interact with the contract, right? So I wonder why we keep getting this error. What's the name of first of all, let's check. Okay. Or Let's just create our call data first. Or fix our error in a bit. So right here we have a call data array. So the call data basically takes an array of all the data that needs to be passed that are going to call. So which is first of all is the initial call it initial counter, right? So now we're creating the kind of like a utility function that does this, takes a initial counter and expected variable constant. I also hope it's not okay. I mean, just so annoying. If annotation is needed. So yeah, I wasn't passing the what you call it, the string as a byte array. That's probably why it was giving the error. So for our call data, we have written the first what do you call it? I've created an array for that. I was talking about how we are going to be passing as our counter. Okay, our constructor. We're passing the initial counter and the owner, right? So initial counter dot serialize. Now we have to serialize this data by whatever form it's coming in, right? That's serialize. We have to convert it into an array of fields 252s. I know I'm mentioning so many technical terms here, right? But that is how it works. To declare a contract, right? We have to pass. We have to declare the contract, get the class hash, then pass uh then we're going to deploy that class hash. I'm going to explain everything. I think it's better if I just write all the code and then explain it once. Oh, sorry, I think something else. Ref code data. Let's reference the code data. Yeah, let's listen to this. And then what else? Mutable variables. Sorry. What else? I'm passing the initial counter. I also want to pass the what contract address. So we're going to be calling the function which I have here. Dot serialize. Ref. So we are serializing it into the call data array. And then that we are now going to deploy the I'll explain everything here, so just give me a minute. Class hash to deploy. Then pass the call data. Just hang in there. Let's unwrap. This is the code we need. Right, so hope are still following. Are we still there? Just give me a reaction. Okay, good. So what this function does, right? Takes the name of our contract. What's the name of our contract here? Counter, right? Name of our contract is counter, and then it unwraps it to get the contract class method. First, it calls the contract class method, and then from there we get our class hash, right? Because that class hash we are going to deploy, and then we create a call data array and serialize the initial counter. So whenever we're calling the deploy contract, we want to pass a particular counter that we're starting from and serialize it to the call data. Then we're serializing. Okay, let me just use the owner instead of using my name. The owner function, which is going to return the contract address. Then we'll serialize that contract address, also passing it into this call data. So what the serialize does kind of like converts whatever form that data is into an array of field 252s. So yeah, I just clicked on that function and I'm seeing like information about that function. So what it does is realizes a value into a sequence. It's a sequence of field 252. So the serialize function actually just does, because it's field 252 that the compiler can actually take when declaring the contract. So he has to convert it to that form. And then deploy the cluster. So there's a method of deploy on the clusters. So I'm going to be passing all this call data into the clusters, to the clusters deploy method, and then unwrap whatever value. And if you also click, if you press control click, it's going to like click here. So you know I'm getting information about the function. Control click and it should get here. So you can see it's returning something. It's returning two things. It's returning contract address and a span of field 252s, right? So now what we actually need is the deployed contract address. So it deploys the contract at a given address. We actually need the contract address. So while we are doing the unwrap is to unwrap this syscall result to actually get the contract address. So I believe you understand exactly how this works when it's 50. So yeah, the deploy contract function works, and then we just want to return deploy contract address. So in most cases, you literally just use a function like this. But now you understand how this function works. So now let's go to writing first integration test. It's an integration test. Why? Because you're using the contract externally to test it. And I said when you're writing a test, you have to add the test attributes. And basically, you are going to test the main functionalities of the test, right? Which is the increase counter, get counter, and decrease counter, right? But a simple test we can do is test initial counter, right? Let me explain how that works. Okay. We can easily just do this. That we want to get the contract address, right? Equals to deploy. We'll call the deploy function. We're taking the function that deploys. So we made this function like a utility that we can always call whenever I want to deploy the contract, right? We just call that function and it works. You can see missing terminal semicolon, and also we have to pass the argument of initial counter. So now we're passing an argument of initial counter, and we can easily do that. Since we want to test the initial counter, I'll do initial counter of U64 equals to 20, right? And then we can pass that value here. I'll pass that variable here. So it's meant to deploy our contract. I mean, where am I getting this error? Expected return type, expected this contract address. So if you look at this function, we do not specify return address, a return type, right? We did not specify return type, so that's why. So it's showing that error. So now we know we're going to return the contract address first. Now this is where we now come to use the dispatcher, right? So the dispatcher exposes the functions and the traits of our contracts. So one function we really need to get. Let me explain what this first test right does. Right, it initiates a counter value. Let's say we are counting from 20, and then we deploy the contract with a counter value of 20. Right. Then we want to confirm that when we deploy the contract with a value of 20 as the initial counter, that it actually deploys with a value of 20. Like when we press the get counter, it returns the value of 20 back to us. Right. That's the first test we're going to do. So we can use the dispatcher, and this is how the dispatcher works. I counter dispatcher, right? So the particular dispatcher for that contract, and it takes the contract address of the deployed contract. This contract address of the deployed contract, just like this, and then returns the contract itself. Kind of like returns the contract itself. So now we can easily call the contract methods from whatever it has returned. Let's say get counter. You should be able to easily call this unexpected return type. This is not meant to return anything. So yeah, that's right. So this is like a simple basic test. So I'm not asserting anything yet. I'm just explaining how we can use the dispatcher. Right. So first of all, we deploy our contract, passing the initial variable. Then into the I counter dispatcher, we pass the contract address, right, of the deployed contract that uses the dispatcher, and then we can now access the methods of this function directly. So now what we want to do, we want to quickly assert, I need to assert macro for this, that initial counter, right, equals to counter, okay, counter. And leave that out. And just put it. And if not, want to return an error, right? Let's try to use the same error message position argument. Expected this what was the test position argument. Expected initial counter, right? Found counter. Great. These are supposed to work. I think we have our first test. Open. And this test is meant to pass. Actually, this is meant to pass. So let's quickly run this test. Also, this package doesn't give any error. Comparing. Come on. Package is in first standard version. I think I'll update this to 0.3 so it matches this. Alright. See what I just did. Simply this fix. Since it is 0.35.2, and just commit to update it. So we don't get any unexpected behavior. But then I will just wait for this test to finish. Don't know why it's taking so long. So yeah, any questions this far concerning our first test? Now, writing the first test and conquering the deployment process would so much speed up writing the other test, right? So any questions so far, what we've been doing from declaring the contract, deploying the contract, writing the first test? Any question? So we can tackle it now. No questions. I thought that was a question. It's taking so long. That's cancelled. No longer than expected. Yeah. Start first. I just to given that person for the standard. Let's see. Okay, now I see. Is my version of SFO that is installed on my PC, not just on the Scarb plugin. So to do this, I have to like install a new version from SM4. Let's see this. I wonder why it's taking so long. Well, while it's taking longer than expected, let us move on um writing our next test. Maybe when we are done writing the next test. Oh, compiling, finish, release. Did not run any test. Ready for that. Supposed to run this test. Test, counter unit test. Taking so long to compile the test. Why? Let's move on to write our next test. So now we're going to be testing increase counter function. Right. First we want to do can leave this, just put any value you want and deploy contract with that. We have our counter. Now we can use this counter pretty easily. Right. So the next thing we want to do is test increase counter. So one thing you need to realize here is that in our components we integrated the only component. So the only person that can increase this counter is the owner, right? And the owner is the contract address that is passed to the constructor. So you actually pass the contract address of the owner to the constructor. So if you come back here and see when we're deploying the function, we pass this the contract address we get from this owner function is what we pass as the contract address, right? So the owner is the owner contract address. So I know we've talked about a lot of things. That's why I'm asking you if there's any question at all. I would really love to explain. But then we're going to learn something very important, I think, right now, right here, which is cheat codes, right? This is an advanced testing concept. I think we're about around here, right? About around here. So I'm talking about cheat code now. Cheat codes, the way cheat code works, cheat codes helps us to be able to trick um the smart contract to be able to cheat the smart contract to use a particular address, right? To some certain conditions, right? For example, now in this scenario, right? Let me give you like a real world scenario. I deploy this contract, all right, and then on Voyager, I want to call the increase counter function on Voyager, which is a block explorer for Starknet, right? And I want to call the increase counter function. If my wallet address is not the contract address that was used to deploy it, right? I would be unable to call that increase counter function. Do you understand? Because when we're deploying the contract, we pass the contract address of the owner into the function. So if the caller, right, if the caller of the function, if whoever is calling the function is not the owner of the function, right, not the owner of the contract, they will be unable to call that contract. But now there's something called the cheat codes, right? With cheat codes, we can cheat the contract into thinking that a particular address calls the contract. Let me really show you how this works in real life. So it's basically you have to import the cheat code from CSS foundry. So cheat. Okay, start like this. Start cheat color address, comma top. And so you can see there are different things you can cheat. You can cheat the contract, can cheat the account contract address, you can cheat the account deployment, you can cheat the block number, you can cheat chain ID, you can cheat so many things. But basically, what we need right now is the cheat caller address. So basically, it just kind of cheats the contract to saying that the person that's calling the address is a particular address. So that's what this cheat caller address is. So now, yeah, important to um, we are getting two imports: the start cheat caller address and the stop cheat caller address. So what that does is we are going to be calling the first function, which is start cheat caller address, and it takes two parameters, right? The first parameter is taking is the so the first parameter is taking is the contract address, right? Or is the contract that I want to cheat. And then the second parameter, the contract address of contract we want to cheat. Right. So this is the contract address of the initial of the counter contract. So when I deploy this contract, you get the contract address. I will pass that contract address to the start cheat caller as the first parameter. And the second parameter is the address we want to cheat the contract as. Right. So for that, we are going to be using the owner function, because the owner function returns the owner contract address, and it was the owner contract address which serialized into the call data. I think I went out for a minute. Sorry about that. So yeah, if you see here, just leave a reaction quickly. Yeah, you can see my screen. So who can tell me what I was talking about last? Just to make sure that I'm not being speaking and blabbing to myself. Somebody.
You were explaining this cheat address, you know.
Okay, yeah. I was talking about the cheat caller address. So we are basically cheating. Every single line of code that comes after this is going to assume that it's being called by the owner contract address. Right? And why we want that? Because we are going to be calling the increase counter function. And according to our code, this function can only be called by the owner because of this line here. Self dot the only component comes with the assert only owner. So this behind the scene is just asserting that the caller address is the owner address that was actually passed at first. Right, that's what it does behind the scene. So this is basically saying that only the owner address that is passed can call the function. Else it will panic with an error, throw an error. And then increase counter, it takes what? It takes a U64 of an amount. So we can just increase it by 30. 21, increasing 21 by 30 is meant to like do 21 plus 30, right? Okay, our test finally compiled. Our test finally compiled, but then it's compiled with an error, which we'll see to that later, since decided to take so much time. Test initial counter to originate internal config statement is defined multiple times. Check. I just want to make sure there's not any error that I can see right now. Then moving forward, so I'm not using this contract address because out of the way. So yeah, because we're cheating the caller address with the owner address, you can actually call this and it's not throw an error, right? But then we also want to do something else. We want to call the stop cheat caller address function, right? And basically take the same parameters. The contract, the address of the contract that you want to cheat, and the address you want to cheat it with. Oh no, no, no. It doesn't take two parameters. It basically takes the contract address you want to stop it. Yeah. Contract address. So if I just do the control click, it literally just takes me to documentation of this code. Says takes the contract address, stamp of contract address, specifying which contract to stop cheating. So yeah, that's how you can easily figure out what's wrong. Then what we want to assert this time. So we have increased the counter. I want to assert that increase the counter from 21. Let's see 2. The initial counter is 2. I'm increasing by 30. So the counter is supposed to be 32, right? So I want to do counter dot get counter equals to. I'm actually just do this like this initial counter plus. Okay, no, we're not passing it as a variable. So let's just do the math. Counter dot get counter equals 32. So we don't really do not need to cheat the contract to use the get counter from method because anybody can call this. You just don't get any assert for this. I think this really should be our function. Right, our test. Let's try to run the test again. Not compile counter due to previous error. Let's see. Let's go to the current documentation. While I wait for the test to compile. I really hope it's not this package that is causing that. We can, there's something I want to check. Okay, this is so yeah, you always want to make sure you are going through these documentations. What exactly I'm trying to check here? I'm trying to check that we're using the positional argument properly. Right, so, okay, this is used here, but in this case, these are not. This is used for other data types that are kind of like struct and other data types. But then where we use this, okay, yeah, that's like this. I don't know if my screen is too tiny. I also wanted to make sure that we're using the right. Right syntax for this, and it's not a syntax that's giving us that error. So yeah, I start with you takes two parameters and then expected this position argument takes this and takes this. That's I think we're correct, right? Let's wait for the contract to compare. Just to compare. And then like check if there's any other error I can see right here that could be causing our test to fail. I don't seem to see any error. It takes quite a while for it. So yeah, basically we've talked about cheat scholar address, right? Any question on cheat scholar address or deploying the contract or any question so far? I'm pretty sure that you understand every single thing that I've done so far because those are basic things and important things that we use every single time. Also, in like getting the address from a simple function as this, so like basic things you'll be using a lot, right? And also, in this case, right, I talked about integration tests, right? So one very thing to note is that we can in larger applications, right? We can have so many contracts. We can have more than one contract. So this is just one contract. We can have a counter contract. We can have a what hello Starknet contract, whatever. And then in that case, right, we can have like several test files that we will have to like. Okay, let me just do something really quickly. I'm trying to like duplicate this file and like give you a view of that how this would be. I mean, that's you can't copy and then just copy. I will delete them. Yeah. So now we have kind of like have test contracts. So yeah, now we have two contracts. Is anybody following? I need reaction. All right. So this is just has to do with how you arrange your contract and code base and module and folder structure. So something like that. So yeah, now we have to test. We have the test contract C and the test contract. We have to contracts, right? The counter copy contract and counter contract. So in that case, we might want to arrange this test into kind of like a more readable way. So we can still add a link.cairo, right? We are not restricted or unable to use a link.cairo. We can add a link.cairo, which becomes like the crate of this test. And we can add the test contract sync. But then in this case, we'll have to create our tests in modules. I think so. We can reference the documentation for this. I have to create our tests right here, test organization. Because I'm trying to give you like real world scenarios where you have to work with larger code base. If you observe, we use to use the CFG test where we are writing unit tests. So you cannot say it's like CFG test here. I'm not writing any configuration for that. Also, I'm not writing any unit test. I observe something where I'm not getting a lot of questions in this class. And this class happens to even be other than the previous class. I was getting a lot of questions in the previous class. So is it that you guys just happen to understand a lot? So yeah, if you look at the arrangement here, you can see you have the mode integration test, mode common, and then you have a lead.cairo that kind of like organizes all these tests together, right? Organizes all these tests together. But I think you understand my point here. What I'm trying to say is that you can arrange your test files into modules, right? You can arrange them into modules and print test contracts.
Question.
Yeah.
So
Right.
the way you organize the tests, so you
Yes.
can both have and organize your unit test and your integration test.
Yeah. So all these tests, every single test you write under the test folder are all integration tests, right? Your unit tests are most likely written in the same code as the file, right? So if I want to make a function with this, right, I can just write
Oh yeah. Okay, I remember.
the CFG configuration to get, for example, I just have to do this CFG test, right? Now I can kind of like write tests for an individual function right here. Yeah. Most times for functions that are like internal implementations or calculations or stuff, right? So unit tests most likely be written right here inside the code, but then they have to pass this configuration so the compiler knows not to compile this test, but only run them when you are running the test suite, right? But then every single test you write under the test folder is an integration test automatically. If you even look at the way they are being compiled, you can see, can you see what is written here? It's written compiling test counter underscore unit test, right? So every single test that is going to be called from this counter underscore unit test is going to be called from each test file or from each file, right? That's assuming there was a test here. And integration test is going to be called is going to call every test with an integration test name like this. You're going to see the naming. I mean, the test runs out. I don't know why it's taking so long to run, but then you're going to see it's going to be named integration test because basically the way Starknet Foundry works, this is the default arrangement of your folders, right? I'm supposed to have a test folder right in the root directory with your source, right? So the SForge automatically knows to look in this folder for your test, right? I don't know why test taking so long to run.
No.
I would look into that in next class. But then
I have a question again.
Yeah.
With the unit tests,
Yes.
they are included in the source file per se, right?
Yes.
Now, if you need to ship it to production, I mean, your unit tests are still going to be in your files there, in your source files and stuff like that.
Production, you mean on chain?
Yeah, deploy. Okay, say deploy. Yeah, on chain.
Yeah, they are not going to be compiled. They are not going to be compiled. Right? The compiler knows to avoid like to those. That's it's kind of like it's going to be like, let's see. I think it's written in the documentation. The test in isolation, the test module. Okay, I think this is the CFG annotation in test module tells Cairo to compile and run only when you run Scarb test, right? Not when you run Scarb build. So when you build, this saves compile time when you only want to build the project, right? And saves space in the resulting compile artifact because the tests are not created.
Mm.
So does that answer the question?
Yeah, that answers the question. Because in some
Right.
other programming languages, the unit tests are separate. They are in other files. They're not in the source file.
Yeah. But that's how it is right here in Scarb. See, I can get rid of all of this copied file. So it doesn't generate bugs, but kind of like explains. Our two tests are showing unexpected gas, not an exception where invalid syscall input, expected gas. Well, but then if you look at the failures, right, you can see it's calling this test from a counter execution test and test contract, which is the name of the file and the name of the test. I really have to figure out why the tests are failing. Unexpected gas, invalid syscall input. I think our input data is wrong. So at least we get a different fail error from the previous test. Let me confirm that. So I know it's not with the check this error or it's not. Not call data to make sure it's not coming from here. Or I think we've taken a lot of time writing the contracts. Yeah, let's just this. Uh, So name of the contract. I really hope it's not smart compilers giving this error. Snapshot. Onlydust. At this point, I think is my compiler. But then you have to make sure I'm not missing anything. Just get the section where it gets removed. But this is called infuse. That's wow. Hence, I'll have to update my SNForge version. Because I really think that's what's giving the error. Because our contract is fine. Our test is fine. So yeah, in this class, we've talked about I've done an introduction to Starknet foundry. We've written tests. We've gone through their documentation on writing tests and wrote basic integration tests. Right. We deployed the contracts. We tested those, even though our tests are failing because of my SNForge package, which is my bad. I should have updated that. I didn't see that before. So yeah, I would like, right? Are these people on this call? Give me a reaction, everybody. Reactions. Right. So I will make this code available, right? While I update my SNForge. So I'll make this code available on GitHub anyway, and I would like for you guys also to like write tests. I'll just write some name of tests and I'll like you guys to write tests for those scenarios, right? I guess write tests for like, for example, tests decrease counter. And in the next class, all we're going to be doing is majorly just doing some practice of the code, right? Of what I've done before. I'll explain further any other thing that we seem to not understand, then give the assignments. But don't worry, I'll make sure this test pass, and any error I encounter on the road or anything I learned from fixing this bug, I'll make sure to get the information just in case you have stuck with that thing. You stuck with this scenario again. But then, yeah, I would pick any other thing that's left here. and I would love you guys to write the decrease counter test. All right. The same way it's going to work. All you just have to do is the cheat the caller address with the owner, and then make the correct assertion of what the value should be. Right? You can use positional assignment to generate like custom or custom panel data. Right? But I believe for most of it you understood very much all every single line of code I've written here. So in the next class we're going to be testing the emitted because if you notice what really took most of our time here was the contract. Right, it was writing the contract. We spent most time writing the contract, which shouldn't be, all right. But then, no knowledge is a waste, right? So, what we are going to be doing next class, we're going to be testing each event, right? So, we're going to be writing tests that confirms that this event is emitted, right? We're going to be testing event, and then we're going to do first testing. I'd love to teach you guys first testing. But mainly in the next class, we're going to be making sure all our test parts. I'm going to next class. I'm definitely going to be getting this assignment of the discrete counter function. We're going to go through every single thing that I've gone through in the span of this. All right. Yeah, mainly testing the events. Okay, this is the cruise function that I'm making the test kind of empty right there. But then I think we'll be here for quite a while, and I'll be able to explain most of these things to you guys. All right. So I'm going to be making the codes available so you can practice and yeah, test it on our end, and I'll leave uh my X handle in the chat just in case you encounter any going back. You encounter any error and you want to reach out, I'll be glad to help. Okay, you should be Telegram. Yeah, so I'm open to helping you out because I should have updated my SM Forge. So I'll not be accounting this. So yeah, I think that'll be all for tonight. Any further question? Or to answer any question. And please, one more thing. In the next class, I would love to see like every single person that was not here. So try to reach out to anybody that you know that was supposed to be here that's not here. All right. Yeah. So good night, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. Yeah, and have a good night's rest if you're going to rest. All right.